Have you ever heard something so painful, so shocking, that you actually stopped breathing for a second? Maybe you were in the middle of a phone call or sitting across the table from your adult child, and then, boom, it hit you like a truck. Out of nowhere, they said something like, "You're not my mother," or "You don't get to tell me what to do. You're nothing to me anymore." And in that moment, something inside you shattered. It wasn't just words. It was a rejection of everything you've poured into them. Every late night, every scraped knee you kissed, every time you went without so they could have just a little more, all of that was suddenly invisible, dismissed, as if it never happened. If that sounds even a little like what you've experienced, I want you to know something very important. You are not alone, not even close. More and more parents over 60 are finding themselves blindsided by the cold distance or harsh words of the very children they once rocked to sleep. And yes, it's heartbreaking, it's disorienting. And if you're like most moms or dads in this position, you've probably wondered what you did wrong, or if you'll ever be able to fix it. But here's something I want you to hold on to. Just because someone says something about you, especially when they're hurting or confused themselves, doesn't make it true. Just because they say you're not their mother anymore doesn't erase everything you've done or the love you've given. That truth is deeper than words, and it's still yours to carry. Now, that doesn't mean we sit in the pain and let it define us. It means we do something. We respond. Not with bitterness, not with shouting, not with guilt, but with quiet strength, grace, and action. We take our dignity back. And sometimes, yes, we make them regret how they treated us. Not through revenge, but through becoming so centered, so strong, and so unexpectedly grounded that they have no choice but to look back and think, maybe I got it wrong. So today, we're going to talk about exactly that. What do you do when your adult child looks you in the face, or worse, sends you a cold message, and says something that breaks your heart into 1,000 pieces? What do you do when they tell you you're not their mother anymore? Well, you don't beg, you don't collapse, and you don't let their confusion take away your worth. You begin by reclaiming yourself. Let's start with this. You have to stop blaming yourself. That's step one. I know it's tempting to go over everything you ever did wrong. The things you said in frustration when they were teens, the decisions you made as a single mom, or the years you had to focus on survival instead of being the perfect parent. But let me ask you something. Do you believe you tried your best with what you had? If the answer is even close to yes, then that matters. Because parenting doesn't come with a map. You didn't have all the answers. And guess what? Neither do they. Your adult child is their own person now. They have their own wounds, their own triggers, their own journey. And as much as they might want to put everything at your feet, that's not where healing starts. So today, stop blaming yourself for their adult choices. Even if you made mistakes, and we all do, you're allowed to forgive yourself and move forward. You don't need to carry shame forever. You don't need to live in regret. You deserve peace too. Next, I want you to reconnect with your own identity, outside of being a parent. I know that might sound strange, but hear me out. For decades, you've poured yourself into your children. You've been the lunch maker, the homework checker, the comforter during heartbreaks, the taxi driver, the holiday planner. So when that role is suddenly rejected or stripped away, it can feel like you've lost your whole purpose. That's normal. But now, it's time to reclaim the parts of you that maybe got put on a shelf. Who were you before you were mom? What passions did you once have? What makes you feel alive now? Is it gardening, painting, hiking, reading, volunteering at the animal shelter down the road? You're still a whole person with dreams, opinions, laughter, and strength. You are not just somebody's mother, you are you. And when you start to live from that place again, fully and unapologetically, it's powerful. It's magnetic. And trust me, people notice, especially your children, even if they pretend not to. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but I don't want to move on. I want my child back. I get that. I really do. But here's the hard truth. You can't heal the relationship until you start to heal. Waiting around for them to apologize or come around while you put your own life on hold will only deepen the pain. Instead, become someone they want to come back to. Not out of guilt, not because you begged, but because they see the strength in you, the peace in you, and they realize what they're missing. And let's talk about boundaries. That's another key step. And it's not about being harsh or closing the door. It's about protecting your heart and your sanity. If your child is constantly disrespectful, manipulative, or only contacts you to unload blame or anger, you are allowed to say, "Not right now." You are allowed to protect your energy. This doesn't mean you've stopped loving them. It means you're choosing not to participate in a dynamic that drains you and keeps the wound open. Sometimes, walking away temporarily is the most loving thing you can do for both of you. Because in that quiet space, healing becomes possible. Respect grows in the silence where control used to live. And sometimes, just sometimes, they need to see who you are without them to realize how much you truly mattered. I once spoke to a grandmother who hadn't seen her daughter in 5 years. The daughter had cut her off after a disagreement about how she was raising her own children. It was cruel, sudden, and deeply painful. But that grandmother, she didn't chase. She didn't write long emails trying to justify herself. She started going back to church. She picked up watercolor painting again. She joined a walking group. And slowly, she found herself smiling again. Do you know what happened 2 years later? Her daughter called her in tears saying, "I miss you. I see now how wrong I was." Now, does it always end like that? No, but it can. And even if it doesn't, your peace is still worth pursuing. There's so much more I want to share with you, and we're just getting started. You're stronger than you think. You deserve love, respect, and joy in your life, even if it's not coming from where you hoped. So take a deep breath, hold your head high, and stay with me, because we're not done yet. You might be surprised at how powerful you really are when you stop trying to fix someone else's journey and start focusing on your own. I know it can feel unnatural at first, especially after decades of being the one who fixes, the one who holds everything together, the one who worries, loses sleep, and keeps showing up even when it's hard. But when your child, your grown child, looks at you and says something so cruel, so unfair, you don't need to prove anything to them in that moment. What you need is to come back to your own center, to the part of you that still believes in your worth. Let's talk about something that most parents don't want to hear, but need to. Sometimes your adult child lashes out, not because of something you did wrong, but because they're deeply unhappy with their own life. They're projecting. They might be in emotional pain, stuck in resentment, or trying to rewrite the past to make sense of their own failures. And the easiest person to point the finger at? Often, it's the one who loved them the most. But don't take the bait. When they say something cruel, like that you're not their mother anymore, they're often speaking from a place of deep emotional chaos. That doesn't make it okay, but it does mean you don't have to absorb it as truth. You can hear the words, feel the sting, and still choose not to let it define who you are. That's where emotional boundaries come in. It's not just about limiting contact or stepping away physically. It's about drawing a line inside your heart where you say, "That pain, I don't carry it anymore. That blame, I won't hold it." You can love someone and still refuse to let them wound you over and over again. You can say, "I am willing to talk, but not if it means being disrespected. I am open to reconnecting, but only if both of us are willing to grow." And sometimes, to make someone regret hurting you, you don't have to say a word. You just have to rise. You rise by healing. You rise by living. You rise by showing them that they didn't break you, that they hurt you, yes, but you didn't crumble. You found purpose again. You made new friendships. You traveled. You learned to sleep through the night again without checking your phone, waiting for their message. You did the hard work of forgiving, not just them, but yourself too. I know that some of you watching right now are holding back tears. You might be in the thick of it, feeling abandoned, disrespected, or even betrayed by the very child you gave everything to. Maybe it was a daughter who used to call you every day and now hasn't spoken to you in months. Maybe it's a son who married someone who doesn't want you around, and now suddenly you're not welcome in their home or even in their life. And here's where it gets real. You can't change that other person. Not by pleading, not by sending letters, not by walking on eggshells or pretending to be someone you're not. The only person you can work on is you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. There was a man I spoke to recently. He was 72, a retired teacher, sharp as ever. He hadn't seen his son in almost a decade, not since a heated argument about money that spiraled out of control. And for years, he kept replaying the last conversation, blaming himself, wondering if he should have said something different. But one day, he decided to stop waiting. He started taking painting classes. He joined a reading group at the local library. And every week, without fail, he wrote a note to his son, not to beg, not to guilt, but to simply say, "I'm still here, I'm living, and I still love you." It took 8 years, but eventually, the son reached out again. Not because he was pressured, but because he finally saw his father as more than the man he was mad at. He saw a life well lived. And that made him curious. Here's something you might not expect. Sometimes, the best way to make your adult child regret how they treated you is by becoming the version of you they didn't believe you could be. You become the version who doesn't crumble under rejection, who doesn't disappear in silence, who stands tall, not to prove a point, but because you've remembered your own value. And when you begin to do that, when you wake up each morning and do something kind for yourself, even something small, you're shifting the story. You're no longer the mom who's been discarded or disrespected. You're the woman who is rebuilding day by day. That strength, it's undeniable. That quiet confidence, it echoes louder than anger ever could. So if your child said something cruel and it's replaying in your mind like a broken record, here's a little exercise. The next time you hear their words in your head, "You're not my mother," or "You ruined my life," pause, take a deep breath, and say this back in your own heart. "I did my best. I am still worthy, and I will not let their pain become mine." Say it as often as you need to. Write it down. Whisper it before bed. This isn't just feel-good fluff. This is how healing begins. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. But you do have to keep showing up for yourself. Because the world still needs your voice, your wisdom, your presence. And here's a little secret. When you begin to love your life again, when you start smiling not because everything is perfect, but because you found peace, people notice. Even the ones who said they didn't care. Even the ones who hurt you. And sometimes they come back. Sometimes they don't. But either way, you will have found yourself again. You may be wondering, but what if they never regret it? What if they never look back? And I understand that fear. It's real. You love them so deeply, gave so much of yourself, and now you're left standing in the quiet, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'll come to their senses. But here's what I want you to hold close. Your healing cannot depend on someone else's change of heart. You can't place your peace in their hands. It has to come from within. Now is the time to reclaim your dignity and to live in a way that reminds the world and yourself that your story isn't over. One of the most beautiful acts of strength is to build a life that you genuinely enjoy, even after the people you expected to be part of it chose to step away. And yes, that might just be the very thing that causes them to see you in a new light. Regret is often born not out of someone begging to be loved again, but from seeing the person they hurt become stronger, calmer, and more fulfilled than ever before. Let's talk about grace. Not the kind of grace that makes excuses for others or sweeps your feelings under the rug. I'm talking about the grace that lets you soften without surrendering. The grace that says, "I see the pain in both of us, but I'm still choosing to live with integrity." It's easy to let bitterness set in. It's easy to harden your heart when you've been hurt. But that's not who you are. You were built with a deeper love than that. You were shaped by years of sacrifice, of showing up, of loving through the chaos. That love is still in you, even if it doesn't have the same outlet it used to. Sometimes grace looks like not responding to that harsh text. Sometimes it looks like keeping the door open just a crack, even if no one's knocking yet. And sometimes it means writing a letter that you may never send, just so you can say what's been on your heart. Because whether they hear it or not, your voice deserves to be heard. I once met a woman at a local coffee shop. She was in her late 60s, wearing a floral scarf and sipping tea like it was the most peaceful moment in the world. We started talking, and I learned that her son hadn't spoken to her in years. She had tried everything, emails, letters, even a few drive-bys hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Nothing worked. And then, one day, she stopped trying to fix it. She didn't stop loving him, but she decided to love herself more. She started volunteering at the animal shelter. She began baking again, something she hadn't done in over a decade. She even started going to a pottery class, said she was terrible at it, but it made her laugh. And that laughter, it changed her. People noticed. Her energy shifted. And 2 years later, her son showed up at her door with tears in his eyes. "You didn't chase me," he said, "but you didn't disappear either. You became someone I missed." That's the power you have. You don't have to chase. You don't have to beg. You just have to become. Become the person your child didn't expect you to be. Become the version of yourself that was always there, buried beneath years of sacrifice and silence. And while you're doing that, I want you to reconnect with the parts of your life that still bring you joy. It might be small, like planting a few herbs on your windowsill or calling up an old friend just to talk about nothing in particular. It might be something bigger, like taking that weekend trip you've always dreamed of, but put off because life got in the way. Joy doesn't have to wait. Joy isn't reserved for people who've had easy relationships. You deserve it, right here, right now. And when it comes to the people around you, the ones who do love you, who do respect you, let them in. Let them remind you of the light you carry. Because sometimes, when we've been hurt by someone we love deeply, we start to believe that maybe we're not lovable at all. But that's not true. You are still lovable, you are still needed, and your presence still matters. Now, I want to say something clearly and from the heart. Whether your child ever apologizes or not, whether they come back or not, you can still live a beautiful life, a meaningful life, a life that inspires the people around you. Because how you handle heartbreak, especially at this stage in your life, can be one of the most powerful examples you ever set. Not just for your child, but for your grandchildren, for your friends, and most importantly, for yourself. So take that walk, read that book, join that group, wear the bright color you always thought was too much. Start over, not because you have to, but because you can. Because your life is far from over. Because your story still matters. And because living well is the most powerful response to being misunderstood or pushed away. If this message touched something in you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Share your story, your thoughts, or even just a simple, "This helped me today." Because when we speak out, we remind others that they're not alone. If you found comfort or strength in this video, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the Strong Elderly Life channel. We're here to build a community where healing, purpose, and strength after 60 aren't just possible, they're expected. You deserve content that uplifts you, supports you, and reminds you that there is still so much ahead. You are more than what someone said about you. You are more than the silence you're sitting in right now. You are strong, you are wise, and you are still growing. Here's to living your best life at any age. You've earned it, and we're here with you every step of the way.